this meeting has now begun. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Okay, do I hear a second? Second. All right. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries. We have any recognition?
Madam Chair, I was going to ask the board to serve with your pleasure, but as you can see, with just a typical crowd, we're bumping capacities in this room. And do you want to open up recognitions at this point? If we do have recognitions, I think we'd probably have to go to Lehigh. Otherwise, we continue doing recognitions at the school level and notify you all of good things that are happening. But again, as you can see in this space, we don't really have the capacity to bring in 30 to 40 people like we used to do. But again, serve with the pleasure of the board. This is not a vote, but a consensus thing. So,
Well, as for me, I think it would be good at this point in time just to recognize it at the school level.
I agree.
I agree.
and we'll provide you updates, and if there's recognitions, we'll have it on here. We just may not bring the families and the students in, but we'll recognize them at the school and also make sure that the press is aware of successes. So, thank you.
Item 4, public comment. Does anyone have anything? You've got 5 minutes. Please don't mention any names. This is your time if anyone wants to speak. Okay, moving right along. Board comments.
I'd just like to thank our staff, our principals, and our teachers and everything for the good job they're doing. I've been going around the last few days, talked to a few of them, and it seems like everybody's doing a real good job trying to do the best they can to take care of our kids and stuff. And I just want to commend them on the job that they're doing. I think they're doing a fine, fine job.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I do too. I appreciate all they do. Yes. Okay, under the consent agenda, we have 2 items. Approval of the minutes and approval of claims and expenditures. Does anyone have any objections? If not, the consent agenda will be passed as written. Reports of the board. Okay, next, Dr. Austin, reports of division superintendent.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, good evening. I've got a few things to run you through. Lots of good news, some concerning news in a couple of instances, but the first thing concerning is this is an update for our average daily membership. Last month we kind of cautioned you that we were at 2,916 students. We budgeted 2,930. Right now, as of current enrollment at the end of September, 2,909, and our average daily membership was 2,910. So that's about 20 students under what we budgeted. So that continues to be a concern on the revenue side, which we will adjust on the expenditure side and continue to monitor that as we go along. For comparison's sake, last year we were at 2,979 for some perspective. It's about 70 students fewer this year than what we had last year. So just be aware of that. The next thing is the good news. So we have this week received several notifications on grants that we have received. Now, some of these are grants that have earmarks from the state for a certain dollar amount, and basically we submit a plan to the state and they fund them. Now, everything that we submitted in for the Elementary Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, as well, and that's ESSER is what they call it, as well as the Governor's Emergency Relief Fund GEAR, those two are what are called block grants. They come from the federal government through the USED, and then that's allocated to the State Education Association, in our case the Virginia Department of Education, and then we submit plans to try to get certain percentages of that. We got funding for about 60% of what we asked for, which in this case ended up being a little low, about $545,000. And you can see what we wrote those grants for, what the funding is for, and this is very similar to the CARES funding that we got, but this is the GEAR and the ESSER funding. So you're just thrilled that we have some additional funding because it plays into the decline, the decreased enrollment. So we're hoping to offset those expenses that we're incurring with these grants. So great news on that front. As well as incredible news last night from the USDA. They acknowledged, we got this notice about a month ago, it was about the time the hurricane came through the Gulf Coast, and they asked us to hold off on doing any kind of press release or putting out any information. So we knew we were getting a $750,000 grant from the USDA, but they did not want us to put that out. They put out the press release, and about 30 minutes later told us they were putting out the press release. So I'm sorry we didn't get this to you ahead of time, but we were asked to not disclose, but great news on that front. What this will do is this will put a device in every classroom that's a core subject area, math, English, science, social studies, that will allow a camera as well as a 75-inch monitor in each one of the classrooms. This also will put a projection device in every gym in the division, elementary, middle, and high, with the exception of Lee High School. Now, the reason we didn't do Lee High School is because, of course, they've got the auditorium. That we've already got a projection system set up in there. But what this will do in each one of our gyms is allow for two 75-inch monitors as well as a camera to be able to project and really change distance learning and how we do that in Lee County. And so, I mean, lots of good things that came out of this, and just thrilled with the efforts that were put into it. The other thing is this boardroom and a room over in the Career Center will be converted into a professional development area where we can actually bring somebody in here and be able to broadcast out more simply. I can show you video clips of it, but I know that that's not something we usually do in public, but we can make those available and be glad to share them with you individually in the interest of time. And then the things that I wanted to say is Christy Howard was very instrumental in pulling this off. She and some other members of our staff, Ms. Willis, Mr. Long, as well as Dr. Bost, worked on this. Now, Dr. Bost, as your grant writer, was involved in this, but the Herculean effort, the majority of the work was done by Christy Howard, as well as a group called Learn, Design, and Apply. This is a grant writing firm that's based out of North Carolina, and they were just incredible throughout this whole process. So appreciate all the partners in that, and especially appreciate the partnership from the federal level and the recognition that comes with that. So great news. Any questions? Okay, next up, operations and technology update. I'm not going to read the operations update, but stuck some technology in here for you because I know you've had questions as we've been waiting on items. iPads are here and they've been deployed. There's actually some classes, some handouts for parents this evening at St. Charles and Rose Hill. Devices are out to all remote students by next Monday. iPads are in schools right now going out to in-person students. What they're doing is teachers have said that what they would prefer to do, and this was with principal feedback, instead of sending iPads home with children every day, the iPads will be sent home on Fridays with students, because that's a remote learning day, if the teacher wants to. And they will go home with students on remote learning weeks, which, as you're aware, election week this year, we've got set up as a remote learning week. So that way we have an opportunity to really work on how we do remote learning from a delivery standpoint as well as from a receiving standpoint from the families. Chromebooks for grades 2 through 12 are here. They are in the process of being deployed for in-person. Distribution will be completed by next Tuesday, and then remote learners will start having that deployment on Monday the 19th through Thursday the 22nd. So I put those dates on there so you'd see that, but you can see devices may be sent home at teacher's discretion on Thursday for remote learning on Friday. So great news to finally have those in. Sorry it's October, but as you know, demand far exceeded supply there for a long time. Any questions? appreciate the patience of technology staff as they're working on this deployment. They've got a great plan, been working with principals on how to roll that out, and it's a learning process for everybody. School calendar development, it's that time of year where we start developing a calendar for next year. I know we barely get one started and we're starting to build the next one. Mr. Hines and Mr. Williams have been working with me because we're already starting budget discussions for next year. So we'll be working through details as that comes available, but wanted to make sure that you're aware that next month we'll have a first draft of a school calendar for you for approval in December. So that way we let our families know early on what's going on. Next up, intramural activities and athletics. Again, I thanked you that evening, but thank you for addressing what we wanted to offer to students. We were a little bit ahead of the curve. I didn't poll students and didn't really poll staff. We just had an idea. BHSL had acted, so we wanted to see if it was something that you had an appetite for and kind of set the pace. As you're aware, neither of our local school divisions decided they wanted to participate in this with us. Well, we polled students at Lehigh, had 21 students total interested in the 4 sports. So needless to say, we won't be offering anything there. But Thomas Walker does have a little more interest, but they're going to do something in school after hours, possibly some blue-gray, different things. But they're going to have some things for their students, but it won't be anything that will cost anything more than what we're already doing. So that's an update on that. And the last thing that I've got, this is a superintendent's regulation, which means it's something where you as a board defer to administration to develop plans on what to do when we alter school schedules. This is what we've had in place since December 16, suggesting that we modify this. Now, this doesn't require action. This is one of those consensus head nod things that, I just don't want you to overrule me or overturn something. But what we're proposing in our operational codes is we've got a code 1 that we've had for we hardly ever call it code 1 because it's just a 2-hour delay, and that's what that is. We left code 2 blank because frankly when we started this we were looking at doing some kind of snow routes. If you recall conversations that we had about did we want to just have snow routes on roads that weren't covered and then work through that. So we left code 2 vacant, and code 3 is schools are open but the students don't come. 12-month staff reports at 10 o'clock, teachers don't have to come in, and that's what we've done, closed code 3. Code 4 is a division shutdown that if we end up with weather that's so bad, or like we did in March and early April with the pandemic when it first set in, we went code 4 and kept everybody home. That's only essential staff reports. What we're proposing adding in as a code 2 is a remote learning day. That if we know today, well, let's say Monday, we find out that we're going to get 4 inches of snow on Tuesday, then before the close of school on Monday, we're going to declare Tuesday, Wednesday, whichever days, remote learning days, and we can still count them as instructional days. Teachers would send assignments home, make those available. We could send iPads home, Chromebooks, whatever we needed to do. So what our code 2 would do would basically be a remote learning day so that we don't close the schools down. We just have them as remote learning days so that we can maintain 180 instructional days. So you all know how your budget is built and how we're funded is on 180 days or 990 instructional hours. So if you don't make the days, you've got to make the hours. So if we claim them as remote learning days, we'll be okay. So that's what we've got on here with some details, and willing to address any questions that you have on that or comments. Otherwise, we'll make this live and get it out to principals tomorrow.
So both policies?
Which policy? There's only one policy.
Support services. Is that what you're talking about under the
Just the operational codes.
Operational codes? Okay.
Plus support services.
I don't know. It's what
Okay, I have the 2 policies up here for reference, so you can see the inclement weather codes as well as the school closing code that is actually a school board policy that links back to the SR. And your school board policy, yes, in the school board policy it says that the superintendent will develop regulations and you all get to review them. So that's what we're doing. Here's guidelines may be reviewed by the school board, but division superintendent or designee may order closing, delay of blah, blah, blah. So that's the school board policy that designates that down to administration. There's no proposed changes in that because that's a Virginia School Board Association policy that you're protected by with legal representation if anything goes south with that policy. And I think Mr. Scherzer will agree that most of the time you go with VSBA policy unless he says that we need to do something different. So any other questions? All right. Back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Any unfinished business? And then 10, action discussion items. I noticed you've reworded that. I was getting some
Yes, so
complaints about
we've got
that.
quite good feedback, so we're just trying to clarify that some.
So, in other words, parents, if they're remote learners and decide, let's say in January, they want to put them back in, they can. Put them back in.
For high school year.
High school. How about all of it, K through 12?
Do you want to read it, or you just want to go, are we already there? I mean, I can.
Okay.
What administration is proposing is that we bring high school students back instead of 2 days a week on an A-B group, that we bring them back 4 days a week. Now, there's some concerns that I'll tell you frankly on that we have administratively. It's going to create two challenges in my opinion. First of all, it's going to be some spacing in classrooms. And how we plan to address that is we're going to highly encourage face coverings if we can't stay 3 feet apart. And if we can't stay 3 feet apart, what we're going to look to do is purchase some kind of divider. I think you've seen in a lot of settings, including some of the debates, where the plexiglass dividers are up, and we may put those in between seats to make sure that we're limiting exposure. We'll make sure that we've got our airflow correct and all that. But just realize that in high school, because of how students rotate through classes, we can't say that there's only going to be 15 students in a class. We may have 15 in one period and 26 in the next, just because of how they're attending. So, just be aware of that. And the other way that we will address that is if we can't get the plexiglass in there, we can't handle it that way, then what we will look to do, and we've talked about this individually, what we'll look to do is either hire or repurpose some of our teacher assistants, somebody with a bachelor's degree that doesn't have a teaching license. And for example, if Miss Ely, I'll use her since she's chair, if she's a licensed teacher, which she is, licensed teacher, and let's say that I'm not, we're both teaching, pick a subject, and she has 13 students, then I could take 13 students in my class, and with some of the technology we're going to be using, we may live stream her teaching the content that she's an expert in into my class. And then what I will do is I will work to support each student, and we may flip-flop some. So that way we don't get in licensure issues, as well as we don't get into issues with a difference in equity of education. So if we can't do face coverings and we can't do the dividers because of space, or I'm going to say liability, we don't want to put dividers up to the point where it becomes a liability, you can't get through space, through aisles, then that's when we will look to split a class, hire somebody, and have them in a different space. Not ideal, but here we are. So that addresses the first part of it, high school. Any questions on that? The second part of it, what we're asking in this is to modify the return to school plan to poll our parents, poll our students and families to ask, if you have been remote, I don't have the number today, but last month you recall there were around 1,400 and some change of those, so around 1,400 students that were doing remote only instruction. What we would like to do is poll our parents and our students and say, do you want to do this for the remainder of the year if you're elementary middle, or do you want to do this for the remainder of the semester if you're high school? The intent there is what we're getting some feedback from some of our teachers, I'm sure you are too, and our principals, is that we may have 3 teachers in a particular grade level. There may be a third of the students that are doing remote learning. And instead of it being a third with each one of those teachers, what we may do, and we've had some interest in this, is one of the teachers may say, I'm just going to take care of the remote, the other 2 take care of in person. Now, even the in-person will still have remote on Fridays, but that way the remote families have a dedicated teacher instead of somebody who's trying to get in touch with them after hours, because they're taking care of in-person from 8:30 to 2, and then they're making contact with families from 2 to 3 o'clock. So we're thinking this may be better service to our families and to our students, and we're also thinking this may be better for some of our teachers. So that's why we would like to poll parents, and if they're willing to say, yes, I love remote learning, I want to stay with it through May. If they do that, then we can look at it individually at a school level to determine, can we change how we staff this? Now, this is not going to mandate that you have to do remote learning, nor take it away. It still remains a choice. Nothing else changes in the plan. But if a family says, I want to stay remote for the remainder of the year, then we can staff to that and adjust accordingly.
Why we wait until October 26th to go back?
The reason we proposed the 26th is that gives us time to make sure the classrooms are set up, that we can handle the capacity. We poll our parents, are you sending them back now that we're going to do 4? Because there have been some parents who have said, if my child comes back 4 days, I'm not sending them. A, B, I'm good, but I'm not sending them back 4 days a week. And we've said, well, if you want to send them Monday, Tuesday, that's fine, and then Wednesday, Thursday remote, we still work with you. But we've had some families say that. So the reason the 26th, it gives us time to adjust transportation, and also gives us time to adjust meals, and also gives us time to have the classroom set up and make sure space is appropriate in each one. And if not, then that's where we'll have to look at staffing. That's the reason we're asking for the 26th. Now, could we do it before that? You tell us what to do, we adjust.
Do you believe it would put any more burden on our teachers if they come 2 days and don't come the other 2? Or would it be pretty much the same as it is now?
I think it'll be the same as it is now, because we've got families that, we had situations over the weekend where students are in quarantine for 2 weeks and then they're planning on coming back. So children still miss. We still have absences that are become remote learning because they're making up their work. They're just doing it as remote learners now. So attendance is still attendance. I mean, we still have children missing.
Can we talk a little bit about why we can't go back to regular school days, 3 o'clock, 3:30?
Again, you as a board decide what to do, but the recommendation that we've made, and the reason the 5.5-hour day is it gives our teachers time to adjust. This is education's about children first, but we got to put our teachers in a position to be successful, and that extra hour and a half is intended to give them time to adjust to remote learning, to adjust to this new normal, and also give them time every day to touch base with any remote learners that they have at the end of the day. Our concern from a contract standpoint is if you go to a 6.5-hour day, you as a board tell us to go to a 6.5-hour day, then our teachers have only got 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after under a contract to do what they've normally got to do and still engage their remote learners. So the intent of the proposal that we presented to you in the summer was to give our teachers and students time to adjust to this. And frankly, if we end up in a situation back like we did in March where the governor pulls the plug on us in January, February, I don't want Lee County Public Schools to be back in a situation where we aren't able to provide any education. We just shut down for another 3 months, but that we've done enough of this remote learning that we can figure out how to do it better if we get forced into that again. So part of that is the learning curve of, I think we're going to be here for a while. Yeah, and that's just Brian's opinion and based on data and other things that we're looking at.
So teachers, I understand they're coming in early.
Yes, sir.
And for what reason?
They're working, depends on.
I'm asking to clear it up publicly because I've been asked this a lot, why we can't have a regular school day.
Kids are going directly to the class, to the homeroom now, right?
Going directly to
So they got to be there for them.
7:30 to, most of our schools are running 7:30 to 2:30. And what that is that's an hour before and 30 minutes after. And what that does is make sure that we don't expect more out of our teachers than what their contract says, and we also don't take a hit on budget by having to pay extra beyond the 7 hours. Teachers are there, but the teachers they have to be in their classroom because we don't send them to a common area anymore where, all of us come into one of you all and you watch us in the gym like it used to be in the old days in March. Now it's everybody goes to their own room and you have to watch your students until school starts at 8:30. That way we have what are called cohorts. If somebody in this room tested positive, then only the students that are in that room would be impacted as opposed to all of us interacted, so all of us have to go home.
Understand, thank you. One last question. Committing, myself as a parent, I wouldn't want to commit my child remote or in person in October for the rest of the year. I know you're talking semester. Why couldn't we do it in 9 weeks?
You could. The reason is because at 9 weeks you help the teacher some, but the intent here is there's been a number of parents who've said, I don't plan on coming back. We're going to stay remote learning through the rest of the year. So we can change schedules because we don't want to change the schedules for students for a 9-week commitment. But if somebody says in a class of 20, let's say a group of 60. A group of 60, let's say 15 say, I'm committed to remote learning for the rest of the year. Well, what we may be able to do is to have those 3 teachers, again, shift to 2 being in person with remotes on Friday, and 1 teacher take care of those 15 remote, and maybe lighten the load on our teachers a little bit, which gets at possibly going from a 5.5 to a 6 or 6.5 hour day, because it's not nearly as cumbersome, because they don't have to deal with in-person and remote and the shift that happens on a regular basis.
So you want to poll teachers in October, perhaps we'll decide if they're going to finish the semester out remote or in person.
We'd like to
We're
poll.
going to re-poll come first of the next semester.
We'd like to poll parents right now, elementary, secondary, for the remainder of the year, and if they say no, fine. We're still going to stick to the 1 week notice that you all have already approved in the return to school plan. But if somebody says, you know, if 500 of our families say we're going to stay remote for the rest of the year, then we can plan for that. And that's all we're asking. We just want to poll, and if they want to commit for the remainder of the year, they can. If they don't want to, we're still doing the week-to-week thing.
I just don't want to shut the door on the one that's wanting to possibly come back.
I agree, wholeheartedly. And if they commit to that, for my part, if they commit to that and they get to January and they say we want to come back in person, fine. You know, we'll figure it out, as long as we don't have 459 of the 500 decide they want to come back in person. I mean, that would be the hard part, and we would work through that. But I fully expect 6 weeks into this, if families are happy with it, they're not going to change.
But I did know some parents that have got in touch with me are saying that their child is high risk, or someone in the family, and they would like to go back in January if the situation gets better, if there's a vaccine.
Then what we would say is don't commit to that you want to stay through the rest of the year.
Right. So, I mean,
They have that option.
Yes, ma'am. The only thing we want to do is we'd want to modify the plan, instead of it being a 1 week notice. If somebody wants to commit for the remainder of the year because they like it that much, then let's see if we can adjust our staffing to that. And it may be like the intramural sports, we may not have any takers. And if we don't have takers, fine, we keep doing what we're doing. But we've had a number of parents who contact us who say, I intend on staying with this for the remainder of the year. This is the best thing since sliced bread. Now on the flip side, I've had some parents contact and say, my child's coming back in person because they don't get it and they're not trying, and blah, blah. So probably the same things you all have heard.
Am I correct when Scott County's doing 4 days a week?
Yes, sir. I think they went back 4 days a week. Was it last week, week before last?
Wise County doing 4 days, regular school days?
I can't actually. I think they're 2 and 2.
They are. Wise County's doing 4 days, regular school days. Scott County's doing 4 days, modified 8:20 to 2 o'clock.
So Wise County did go back 4 days?
Full days.
Yeah.
4 days or 5 days?
4 days.
4 days.
Yes.
Now, the thing that I've shared with you also is I shared our most recent metrics from the Virginia Department of Health. Our metrics do not indicate that we should consider going back to 5 days, nor do they say that we should consider bringing students back. If you look at the core indicators, which this is a public document through the VDH, if you all need that, let me know. But you can see the one red indicator says, you know, really we should be continue doing hybrid. But our community is saying, to me at least, that, you know, they want to come back in person, or at least have the option 4 days a week for their high school students. So I think it's like everything else that you, the board, has done is, you know, I would suggest we give our parents and families the option. If they choose to do it, great. If they choose not to do it, great. We'll serve your children.
I agree. I can make the motion. There's no other discussion, I'm sorry. But I will make the motion. Action item A.
I hear a second.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries.
The thing that I say is the administration will continue to evaluate this almost like we're doing on a monthly basis, and come back with recommendations if we need to consider going to a longer day, or could consider going to a longer day. So I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
I do have a question. When there are positive cases in a school, are you letting all the principals and teachers know, or are you just, you know, how are you handling this?
The Department of Labor says that we have to notify everybody in that building. I've worked very closely with Mr. Sturgill. We notify the staff and the students and the families. Now, you've probably noticed that we also put out a press release so everybody finds out about it, but we directly notify the individuals that are impacted.
Now, where does the press release, where does it go to? Does it go to like Kingsport Times News?
Yes, ma'am. Goes to, go down my list, CYB, JHL, Powell Valley News, Kingsport Times News, WSWV,
David Harley.
Heritage, and there's somebody else, and I can't think of who that is, right? But yes, ma'am, all the big media outlets that serve our community, that's where we get it. The same letter that goes to families goes out to media outlets.
And it's also posted on social media.
Yes, we post it on social media, and yes, that's correct.
Do you make personal contact with the principal of the school?
Yes, ma'am. Usually the principal notifies me is how it gets started.
Oh, okay.
Because the hard part about this, and I know you all get contacts sometimes from people, as do I, there's a positive case in this school and you've not reported it. The challenging thing about this virus is it's all self-reported. One of you all could be positive tonight, be under quarantine. We don't know it. There's very few people in the county that get that notification. I'm not one of them. So it's all self-reporting. It's self-reporting on quarantines, it's self-reporting on positive cases, and that's frustrating. I'll just tell you frankly, it's been beyond frustrating for me. So, anytime we get a report of there's a positive case in a school, I call the principal. But the ones that have been positive so far, it's because principals have called me, usually after hours that they found out, and that's when we start the process. That's why you all get them at some very odd hours.
Well, it's a little bit scary too. Not only frustrating, but to me it's a little scary thinking that you can go and have it and spread it, whether it be students, teachers.
And that can happen at Walmart, that can happen at Food City, that can happen at Dollar General. I mean, they're supposed to stay quarantined, but that doesn't mean everybody is.
That's true.
And I don't mean taking it lightly. It's just the lack of seriousness on some people's parts is concerning at times.
How is the transportation coming along?
Routing is coming much better, but the challenging part of that, it changes every day, frankly. It's one of these things we're right now starting to look at routes again because we've had such an increase in the number of students that are coming to school that we're going to have to reroute some buses because we're getting at capacity in some of our buses. So, the part of the money from the money that the governor announced today, which was another $500,000 that he announced, on top of what we talked about earlier, but we're looking at possibly purchasing some buses with that we desperately need, and it's between mileage and between routes, we've got to address buses, and that's tough to do in a budget, but we are continuing to adjust transportation, and I told you in July when we started this, the toughest part of this was going to be transportation, and I didn't miss it because the hard part about it, we've got families who will say, okay, I want to start again, or I know I'm not doing it anymore. And we have children showing up at the bus stop with a fever saying, I'm running a fever and I've got symptoms, I'm not coming. Well, don't get on the bus. And by the way, my two siblings are not coming either. You just can't make this up. I mean, it's a challenge, but I'm going to say the efforts our bus drivers are making, the efforts our transportation department's making to address those and get students to school in a timely manner have been incredible. So hats off to them. I appreciate what they're doing.
We're ready to go to B, action item B. If any, to award a contract for $90,377 to Boiler Equipment Company Incorporated to install a propane boiler at Jonesville Middle.
Did any local suppliers submit a bid?
The bids are on there. I can't remember. There were 3 bids. I think there was Roanoke, Knoxville, and I think Southwest Air, I think, turned in a bid.
Was they just way higher or their local focus?
You've got the copies in there, but yes, sir. We recommended the lowest bid. And what this is, for perspective, 2 years ago, we had a coal boiler go down, and the other one was more than acting up, so we rented a boiler. Can't make that up. We rented a propane boiler to get us through the winter of, was that 18, heading into 19? So we rented that boiler and we took out the coal boiler in the summer of 19 and have been trying to get the specs for what we needed for a boiler this year. Now the coal fire boiler got us through last year, but the evaluation that we've gotten is we really need something as a primary and then have the coal as a backup. So that's what we're recommending with this.
Propane will be the primary.
Yes, yes, sir. Propane has ended up, it costs us more per unit than coal, but at the end of between the man hours it takes to put the coal in, to get the coal in the boiler, to get the cinders back out, to make sure it's running and all that, the propane has saved us a lot of money on man hours, as well as personnel costs. So you flip a switch and here we are. So propane's been a good investment. Natural gas would be better, but we don't have that everywhere.
Just saying, we're noted as Cole County, you know, just say that we don't have to go to that route. That's all.
It's hard to get stoker coal. I mean, it is, and I think I shared that. We get bids. I mean, we usually get one, if not two, and that's it. Yes, bid processes are eye-opening. Be glad to address any other questions. Yeah.
I have a question on the old units that were moved out from Elton Hall. The double wides, have they been sold or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do y'all want to act on this and then talk on other things, or, but yes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and act on action item B.
Okay, sorry.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. All right.
Ms. Gary, to answer your question, those have been disposed of. We're in the process of getting them off property, and that's been a challenge. Our staff's actually had to get involved, and we've actually had to involve Mr. Sturgill in that process, that possible legal action. So they have been sold. They're not ours, but they're still on our property, which means they are ours until they get relocated. So we're working through that.
Did someone out of town buy them?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you get that one gone today? I didn't pay no attention when I left if it was gone or not, until they was working on it.
I didn't. I don't know. I was there earlier today when I saw you, but I don't know. It was still there when I was there.
Okay, action item C, if any, to request the Lee County Board of Supervisors the appropriation of $90,377 from the Lee County School Board Capital Reserve Fund for the boiler project at Jonesville Middle, and further request that the funds may be replaced by the school board dollar for dollar as practical.
I'll speak to that very quickly. You have a capital reserve account that is not appropriated by the Board of Supervisors. That's why we need their permission. So that's what we're asking to access that. They've indicated they would give that, so that's why we're doing this. And what we're asking is that if we end up with the money in our operating budget at the end of the year, that we can put this money back in dollar for dollar, because you're probably aware to put money in capital reserve, it's 2/3 of whatever we have left over at the end of the year, and 1/3 goes back to the county. So in this, you're asking to access the capital reserve, and if we have the money, put it back dollar for dollar instead of 2/3, 1/3.
I'll make the motion with a quick question. The
Yes.
balance after this, do you know anything?
It's in the financial side.
Just later is fine.
Reserve ballpark.
I'll say it.
It's around 230. So take 90 off of it. And still have 140-ish in there. That's ballpark. I can look it up if you need.
That's fine.
Thanks, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, did I hear a second? Have a
Second.
first for Mike, second. Rob, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is personnel. Are y'all,
Closed session.
you're wanting closed session? Okay.
We have to.
I'm sorry.
Let me see if I can pull it up real fast.
I got you.
I can't see it there anyway.
It's 22318.
Okay, I make a motion, we enter into closed session to discuss personnel under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, pending and threatened litigation under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1. What was the other one, A6?
A6.
Okay, I can't see, like I say. So I'm taking my glasses off.
I'll second.
Okay, second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Unanimous.